You can see what actually did.
Out of your mind.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths. In particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Come on, Franklin. It's going to be a fun trip. If I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm going to be able to take it.
Listen, I think I'll walk down to the creek before it gets too dark. How do I get there, Frank?
Well, there's a trail down there between them 2 old sheds.
Can I go too?
I think you better stay here.
I don't know what happened to the others.
There's nobody out there now. Look what your brother did to that door. You damn fool. You ruined the door.
This is Kurt Rector from House of Death, and you're listening to The Hysteria Continues.
And indeed you are. Welcome back to The Hysteria Continues, episode 85. And this episode we're headed off to Texas, of all places, for what Nathan has described as his favourite ever movie. So it looks like we're going to have a healthy debate a little bit later. But this is the podcast where Saw is family, or is it? We're going to find out. So introducing the clan, Nathan, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm okay.
And are you excited to be covering this film?
Yes and no.
Oh, okay. Is that because you're worried that there may be differing opinions?
Yes, I'm worried that my fellow 3 podcasters are going to spend the section bashing it, which will hurt my feelings.
Okay. Well, we'll see. I think it's going to be. I think that's going to be interesting, isn't it, Erik? How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Justin.
Oh. Are you
this week I'm going to do the podcast and be even more sexy than normal. Ooh.
Do you know what? I've got this mental image of you with a beard, dressed in that white Marilyn Monroe dress with the hairdryer up your minge.
Yep.
Blowing. Is that what it's like?
That's exactly what it's like, Justin.
Somebody that knows Photoshop, get on that.
Yes, indeed. That's a mental image that will keep on giving. Okay. Well, Joseph, are you turned on?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. It's good. It's Joseph's love speeds, or Eric's love speeds.
Good timing right there.
Yes. So,
by the way, Justin, your insolence is inefficacious.
That's not a Simpsons reference, is it? Or is
that means you're terrible. Yes, it is.
It is. Oh, well.
I find that insult to be shallow and pedantic.
It's going to be one of those shows. But, well, yes. Well, I'm good as well. I just got back from holiday, one of our many holidays, as our friends in America know that the British and Irish, we rarely work. It's mostly vacationing. So I just got back from 2 weeks in Spain, which was very nice. So looking nice and suntanned and relaxed and full of Rioja. But we are going to somewhere even hotter a little bit later. But before we do that, let's get on to some recently seen. So it's been about 3 weeks, I think, since we last recorded. So Nathan, what have you watched recently?
Let's see. I went to Grant's last night, or not before last, and I watched one of the Ghost House movies. It was called Dark Floors. It's a hospital setting, and the description actually sounded really interesting. It's like these people get trapped in an elevator. It's like a security guard, a nurse, a man with his autistic daughter, and a couple other people. They are on this elevator, and the elevator just kind of stops, and when the doors open, the hospital's empty. And it's like time is like kind of stopped, and they've entered this weird dimension where there's all these weird creatures killing them off one by one. And I love the idea, but I just didn't really feel this movie was executed very well. And the creatures weren't really that scary. I mean, very CGI, and I don't know. I just thought they looked more like a heavy metal rock band more than terrifying creatures, which actually I think they are a band, to be honest. The ones in the film, I didn't research enough about it, but I think that they are like a Finnish band or something like that.
Is it Slipknot?
If you ever heard of Gwar?
Is it Lordi?
Yes, that's who it is.
Yeah, they won the Eurovision Song Contest one year.
Okay, yeah, that's who it is. Because Greg kept seeing the lead guy in the film and kept calling him Gwar, which I didn't even know who that was. But
they were another kind of shock, sort of horror.
Yeah,
heavy
the
metal
lead
group.
lead singer recently passed away, Odorous Arungus.
Oh,
yeah.
But I would say that this movie is, I just thought it was meh, to be honest. I mean, it has some good moments, but the whole, movie itself overall was just very underwhelming.
Okay, I've not seen it. Erik or Joseph?
No.
Nope.
No.
I am aware of the phenomenon that is Lordi, though.
Yes.
Well, Lordy.
It's because the Eurovision Song Contest is usually won by some morose French chantreuse or somebody some kind of granny playing bongos with her breasts or something. So it's kind of to have a kind of heavy metal group like when it was a bit of a kind of a shot from the left, wasn't it, Erik?
Yeah, but I mean, they're not exactly heavy metal. They're more hair metal, I suppose.
Yes, I kind of guess you're right. Yeah. Because we've talked about the Eurovision Song Contest. It's not as good as it used to be. It used to be much funnier, and now it's still quite funny. But it's just like lots of very camp and very stupid, and lots of countries trying to outdo each other with ridiculous things. And then what usually happens is whoever wins it has to host it the following year. And then Ireland kept on winning it, didn't they, Erik? And they didn't want to host it, so they kept on putting more and more stupid, ridiculous acts that kept on winning. So it kept on backfiring.
Yes, because it's quite expensive to host, and Ireland was not in the best economic state to do that.
No. So, okay. Well, thanks, Nathan. Anything else?
I watched the new film Animal.
Okay.
And I loved it. I thought it was one of the best movies I've seen this year so far. It's about, this group of hikers going up in the mountains, and they end up coming across this weird creature who, it's like starts basically killing them off and eating them. But the movie's actually really good, and I like the fact that the group of friends this time, they didn't act like they hated each other. They actually seemed like, they were a group of friends, and I don't know, they felt like real characters, which I like. And, I thought the acting was good. The effects were really good. I love the effects. And I thought it was really good because the movie is actually very unpredictable. There are some characters that you expect would at least, make it towards the end, and they die very early on, And it's just one of those movies where you just don't know who's going to be the last person standing, if anyone. And I like that. And I don't know. I just thought it was a really fun time. It's obviously not meant to be taken seriously. It's just like a popcorn creature feature. It was really good, though. Very entertaining.
Okay. That sounds good. I've not seen it. Joseph, you watched it?
Nope, haven't seen it yet.
Okay. And I take it you haven't, Erik?
No, I hadn't even heard of it, but it does sound good.
Yeah, okay. Excellent. Well,
I think at least one of you guys would like it. I mean, if you just don't take it too seriously, it's just a fun movie.
Okay, right. Well, sounds good. Anything else?
No, I can't really think of anything else. I did watch a really funny documentary, but that's not horror. That's comedy.
Okay, right. Well, thank you, Nathan. Joseph, how about you?
Not one thing, Justin. Not one damn thing.
I don't believe that. Really?
No, seriously. I've been doing like overtime at work, so my movie watching has been kind of bleh lately.
Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about how things are going with Gory Graduation?
Oh, okay. Yeah, basically we've initiated callbacks to hire some actors, and they're coming in on September the 2nd to do read-throughs with each other to gauge who has the best chemistry. And we didn't get to do that on the last film, so we're kind of spending a little more time with the actual casting process this time around. But you can pretty much follow the progress on Facebook or Twitter. Just type in Gory Graduation, and if you haven't liked our page, give us a like. We're hoping to film in the summer of 2015, and we'll just see what happens.
Excellent. Okay. Yes. Well, that sounds good. That we shall be following the progress on the podcast, and I'm sure you'll keep us updated. So, thank you, Joseph. How about you, Erik? What you been watching?
Okay, well, I recently saw the Curtains Blu-ray that came out from Synapse earlier this month, or was it last month? And it looks great. It's great in high def, and but the extras are really, really good on this release. There's a little featurette from 1980 about the director Richard Chupka. It sort of follows his transition from being a cinematographer to a director, but it includes behind-the-scenes footage of him making curtains, which is something I never thought we'd get to see. There's also a great sort of making of retrospective featurette with Lynn Griffin and Leslie Donaldson, along with the director and some other crew members. And there's some great info there, including Lynn Griffin revealing that the mystery image from the back of the VHS sleeve of her on stage with the 5 other girls dead, murdered, and all propped up in chairs. She reveals that was the original ending, and that the dialogue that she did deliver in that scene is the same as what she now delivers in the scene that's in the film where she's in the asylum at the end. They also reveal that the sequence with the doll in the middle of the road, that was originally not meant to be a dream sequence at all, but meant to be one of the murders in the film. And that scene, that peculiar scene where John Vernon is shot and he falls out of a second floor window and then falls into a first floor window, which sort of defies physics in a way. They sort of explain the reasoning behind that. It was an existing shot they had of the snowmobile crashing through the ground floor window. So they reused that. So it was just really interesting to hear about all the problems with the film and, actors who disappeared and for no particular reason and what was originally supposed to happen to them. So it's definitely a must-have release for fans of Curtains, I would say, mainly. Well, not just because it's great to see it in high def, but the extras are really, really interesting and enthralling.
Do they mention anything about the original film being the Banshee or whatever?
They do mention it briefly, yeah, but they don't go into too much detail.
Oh, okay.
I think because I've got it as well, got the Blu-ray, and they do talk with the guy who did the special effects, didn't they? And he talked a little bit about that. And wasn't he saying that it was partly to do with the fact that Samantha Eggar wouldn't wear the makeup? Was it something to do with that?
Yes.
That was part of the reason why they changed it from a Banshee, wasn't it?
She sounded like she was very standoffish with all of the cast and crew as well. So,
Well, Terror Trap, which is a fantastic website, I've just done an interview with her, and they talk about, obviously, she was in lots of films, including The Brood and The Collector, I think it was, and other sort of like horror thriller films.
Is she in Demonoid as well?
In Demonoid, of course, yes. But she talks about the film and says that she barely remembers it and was only doing it for the money, which is, I guess, what most actors and actresses do, really.
At least she's honest.
Yes, but she said she was more, I think she was either going for a divorce or something, so she doesn't remember it that well. But no, I agree. I think it's a great release. Curtains is a film that I like. I don't love it. I think it's got some amazing sequences in it, and it's got a very peculiar and individual atmosphere, but it's still, as a whole, it doesn't really work for me.
It's got John Vernon with a beard in it, Justin.
Yes, I know that's very much up your alley, or you wish it were, Erik. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic release. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they do with Prom Night.
Yeah, that will be really, really
that's
good.
Going to be amazing to actually see, especially see Prom Night and actually better see what's going on in the last half of the film. Is going to be a bonus at the very least. So, but how about you guys? Nathan and Joseph, have you seen the Curtains Blu-ray yet?
Nope.
No. Are you going to sit down?
I want to. I want to buy it. It's just I've been saving up for other reasons, but I've been having to put money back. But once, I don't have to save money, I do plan to pick it up because I'm like Justin. I don't love curtains, but I do like it. I think there are some problems with it. I've always felt that the final confrontation felt very rushed. I mean, I love the dialogue between the two last people standing, but when I guess there's the actual confrontation, it just goes so quick. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, "Is that it? Like that's all there is?" I mean, I guess it still kind of works, but I still really like the film though.
Cool. Okay. Right. Well, thank you, Erik. Is there anything else?
Yeah, speaking of Leslie Donaldson, I also watched Scream Factory's release of Deadly Eyes, which is the movie based on James Herbert's novel The Rats. It came out on Blu-ray. It's fun, but it's very flawed. Nature takes revenge, where oversized rats sort of wreak havoc on the streets of Toronto. So it's kind of Kingdom of the Spiders, except with these oversized rats, which are actually dash huns in rat suits. It came out the same year as Rats Night of Terror, the Bruno Mattei movie, and it's not up to that level of delirious fun, sadly. But I mean, it's certainly very watchable. I think it's kind of TV movie-ish. There's very, very brief glimpses of gore, and the pacing maybe is slightly pedestrian. But there's a great scene in a cinema where the giant rats are let loose, and it's kind of like demons-esque mayhem ensues, and there's some fun extras on the disc, including Leslie Donaldson and Lisa. I think she pronounced it Langlois, of course, from Happy Birthday to Me. They describe themselves as Scream princesses because Jamie Lee Curtis was the Scream queen, so they couldn't match up to her. So they're Scream princesses, they say, because of their frequent appearances in horror movies around that era. Certainly not an essential purchase, but Deadly Eyes I thought was kind of fun. I don't know, has anyone seen it? 1982 movie?
Yes.
And?
Good.
A man of so few words.
Actually, I haven't seen it in a while, so it's kind of foggy on it, but I do remember enjoying it.
I've
never seen it.
Have you not? I've got the old VHS somewhere. I remember renting it back in the mid '80s, and I've got the VHS somewhere, and so I haven't seen it for years. I think it's one of those videos, and this is the perils of VHS, of digging a film out and thinking, I'll watch that, and then putting it in and realising that the tape's kind of degraded so much that you're watching kind of tape rolls and static more than the film. So I look forward to catching up with it. I remember it being fun, but certainly I think it was released as The Rats in the UK, wasn't it?
Yes.
I may be wrong. I think it was.
There was a film called The Rats. Is it the same one? Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I can remember the VHS cover. I've got it. I can't see it from where I'm sitting, but I think it was released as The Rats rather than Deadly Eyes, which would make sense, wouldn't it, if it was based on the James Herbert book, and it was looking to capitalise on that, because obviously that would have resonated with a British audience.
The print that they use on the Blu-ray is under the title. I think it's Night Eyes. It's called when the credits come up. And speaking of Scream Factory, one last one I saw was Without Warning, which they've just released as well, which I think is a really fun 1980 Graydon Clark movie. Yes. Of course, he made one of my favourite 80s movies in Uninvited, which came out maybe 7 or 8 years after this. But that's a different story. This one is, everyone knows it's kind of a proto Predator movie. It's an alien from space with a huge big bulbous head. Who are misses? Who his weapon of choice is these kind of how would you describe them? They're kind of pancakey organic things that he throws at people, and they're just basically little critters that he throws at people like frisbees, and they start eating them in kind of gooey ways. They're like ninja stars. It's lots of silly fun. Some great effects in it, pulled off on a very low budget. It's got that real sort of latexy 80s gore effects in it. And a great cast of once-wears like Jack Palance, Cameron Mitchell and Martin Landau are in there. And pre-NYPD Blue and CSI, David Caruso is in there quite briefly as a, I think the hunky guy, if you can believe that. Highly recommended anyway. Without Warning is a great movie in my opinion. Possibly better than Predator. Sorry to say that, Joseph.
I would agree. I would agree with you, Eric.
Is that The Grudge?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
I do enjoy it a lot. It's probably a little more, I guess you'd call fun in a campier way than Predator. Predator's more serious, but I enjoy both of them. So.
Wasn't Without Warning kind of lost in missing in action for quite a long time?
Apparently it wasn't available in any kind of format for years. Yeah.
Because I had, again, it's another one I've got the old VHS of, and I really, really enjoyed the film. I think it's a great mishmash of sci-fi and slasher. A bit like, have you ever seen Evils of the Night?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, which is really awful film, but it's quite funny.
That's the one where the guy is basically he's like harvesting their blood or something, or
that's right. It's kind of like vampires. Like it's got David Carradine, I think, and is it Julie Newman who played Catwoman in the original Batman as kind of these kind of vampires from outer space.
Julie Newmar.
Newmar, sorry, yes, who kind of capture teens to take their blood. But it's full of the most stereotypical kind of 80s slasher teens in bikinis and swimming trunks, all at this kind of beach, this kind of inland lake front, and all sunbathing, and then being stalked and hacked up and drilled and stuff. I mean, it's an awful film.
I remember that movie. The poster has the very slasher-esque, kind of like The Burning, where they're in the water and there's the camp, and I always thought that was a slasher film, but it's not.
No, it's got in the same way as Without Warning's not really a slasher movie, is it? It's kind of, except if you can have flying pizzas with teeth, the slashers. but yeah,
that sounds good.
But no, I love Without Warning. It's a great little film. So another one I'm sure I'll pick up at some point. So thank you, Eric. Is there anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, right. Well, let's run through a few that I've seen recently. Erik lent me a film called The Possessed, or Demon Witch Child is another title, which I don't think I was aware of. It was by Armando Desorio, who is better known for the Blind Dead movies. And this is kind of basically one of the many this is Spanish, but European rip-offs of The Exorcist around the mid-1970s. And this has a little girl who, I think, a balding witch, is arrested and then dies, but her spirit goes into the body of the police commissioner's little girl, who at various stages throughout the film suddenly goes bald, and then goes around saying cocksucker to people and things like that.
I love it.
In my favourite scene, she chops off the penis of her governess's boyfriend and then sends it to her in a gift wrap box and watches her open it. So it's the only Exorcist rip-off with a cock in a box. So that was a good fun. You're a fan of it then, Erik, I take.
Oh, yeah. I think, just remind me, there is a scene where she's sort of standing in a room and her sort of upper torso turns around 300 or 180 degrees and her legs stay stationary.
Yes, that's right.
He's got in a kind of like cheesy effect, but great fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as hilarious as something like Beyond the Door.
No,
with the nose flute and all that kind of thing going on, but it's still solid, kind of silly fun. But as with many of these kind of movies from that kind of time, it does things you wouldn't necessarily expect to see. Like they sacrifice a baby, not in real life, obviously, but in the film, and you wouldn't expect them to actually do that. You would expect the baby to be saved, but it's not, and they do sacrifice the baby. So stuff like that, I thought it's good fun.
The lead actress, this is a bit of trivia I read up when I was watching the movie. The lead actress in it, or who plays the possessed girl, is the girl who also dubs Linda Blair in the Spanish version of The Exorcist, and that's why she was chosen.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, thank you. Another film I saw, and this was courtesy of a recommendation from Patrick from Scream Queens, was the new anthology All Hallows Eve by the director Damien Leone. And this is a three, well, basically, as classic anthologies go, it's like a wraparound story, and this one has a babysitter looking after two kind of pre-adolescent children on Halloween, and they go after they're coming back from trick or treating. One of the kids finds a video cassette in their bag of candy, and they put the video on and start watching these films basically, and they all revolve mostly revolve around one character, which is kind of this kind of psychotic clown called Art the Clown. Who is the best thing in it? I mean, basically, the film it started by there were two short films and another short film shot for this that were put together as part of the anthology, but it wasn't filmed originally as an anthology, but it was put together. So it doesn't quite work because the second film in it is an alien abduction film, which is quite suspenseful. They're all very well shot. They've got a really good retro feel to them, but it's not as good as the first. The first one's quite silly as well. It's about a young woman who gets abducted at a train station and then finds herself surrounded by witches and demons. But the third film revolves around, which is probably the most slasherific of all of the films, has a young woman driving home, and she stops at a gas station, and there's a clown there, this Art the Clown, who's basically just shat all over the bathroom, apparently. And this guy's saying to him, I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you. And basically, the rest of the film is this clown chasing this woman through the night. And it's really good. It's really, really well done. It's the best one of them all. But Art the Clown, the guy who plays it, is apparently you will see him in another film. But it's definitely a slasher kind of really good slasher villain in the making, because the guy who plays him is really good, and he's really sadistic and scary actually. And it also kind of breaks the fourth wall in the wraparound story. So it's definitely worth a watch. I don't think the rest of you seen it yet, have you?
No. I want to see it though.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. It's very flawed. It's there's kind of a lot of the pitfalls of low budget filmmaking, but the wraparound and the third story are really worthwhile. So definitely worth seeing.
Justin, how many more of do you have more like you've seen?
Have I got? I've got one. Why?
Okay, go ahead. Because I just remembered a movie I did watch and I completely forgot about it. But go ahead, and I'll just talk about it after you're done.
Well, I was only going to say, I mean, we're on holiday. We watched Hannibal, the first season of Hannibal, which the NBC series based around the characters from Thomas Harris's Red Dragon. Have any of you seen it?
No, but people keep saying that it's actually really good considering it's on a network.
I thought, well, it's interesting actually with it leading into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the film. I mean, I quite liked it. It's very the problem it has is it doesn't really have the courage of its convictions. It has a serial killer of the week, which means it's not like a top tier series in so much it's still quite episodic. It has a story arc throughout, but it's a bit like it doesn't really credit its audience with enough intelligence to not have a kind of really outlandish serial killer, because there's in each episode it's going to set around the characters of Hannibal Lecter, who's a psychiatrist who's kind of working with the FBI, and this guy who has this empathy. He can sort of put his mind into the killers to try and track down serial killers, and then each episode has somebody doing something really ridiculous, kind of like somebody does a massive totem pole of bodies on the beach, and so it's all kind of very exaggerated, and so but it's very beautifully shot and it's very well acted. It's just having that whole kind of episodic kind of killer of the week thing just shows it's not what I would say kind of top tier. But it's worth a watch. But yes. So Joseph, you said you remembered.
Yeah,
one.
I completely forgot about this, but I watched a movie called Found.
Okay.
It's basically about this little boy. He's like obsessed with horror films, and he basically finds out that his older brother is a serial killer, and he keeps like decapitated heads in a bowling bag in his closet. And that's pretty much the story. It's a really low budget. I think it was a crowd-funded film, and
Hello.
I heard a lot of noise, so I stopped talking. But basically, this boy, he's obsessed with horror films. He finds out his older brother's a serial killer. He keeps decapitated heads in a bowling bag in his closet, and it's pretty. It's okay. It's really interesting because it's kind of like a dramatic horror film. I mean, it's pretty graphic. But the one thing I liked about it was that there's all these like posters in this little kid's room of all these movies that you wouldn't expect, someone in today's time, especially being, like a 9-year-old boy would actually know about, like, Popcorn. And I think he actually has a Without Warning poster in his room. The problem, though, is that the movie features some terrible, terrible acting, and the motivation behind the older brother for being a serial killer is kind of murky and, dare I say it, a little racist. And so the tone is a little off, so you don't really know if you should kind of root for him or not. But yeah, I mean, it's been getting a lot of great press. I don't know if you've heard about it, but I'd say maybe watch it with reservations because it's got an interesting, angle, but it's kind of just a little too amateurish.
Okay. I've not heard of it before, but it sounds like one worth checking out.
No, there's a point in the film where the little boy, him and his friend get a tape out of his older brother's room. His older brother also watches a lot of horror films, and it's some kind of movie about a headhunter from the 70s, and it's like a kind of a grindhousey thing, and it's really just overly graphic and overly gory, and he starts to think that maybe his brother is getting inspiration from this, and it's weird because they crowdfunded this found film, and now they're crowdfunding a film version of that little film that's within the film. So there's kind of all these little layers going on. I mean, it's an interesting movie, but it could have been executed a lot better.
Okay.
How much did they get? Do you know?
I don't remember for found, but I think for the one about the headhunter, I can't remember the name of it. But I think they made their budget on that. I think it's like maybe 15 or 20,000.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Although I would say I don't know if I trust any of you guys when you say that a movie has bad acting after what you all said about Ronnie Blakely. Because I rewatched Nightmare on Elm Street again, and I just do not see it.
I don't understand how you cannot see that. I know you're a connoisseur of bad acting, Nathan.
Well, I am. I just don't see that she's that bad.
She's awful.
Awful?
I don't think she's bad in a normal sense. I think she's just kind of flat.
You don't think she's a convincing lush? Justin, you know this.
No, well, Lushes are fun. They're upbeat. They're life and soul of the party. She looks like she's taken horse tranquilizers rather than had a vodka cocktail.
Cashman.
So, but I mean, well, as we know, we have differences of opinion, which we'll be finding out very shortly when we come to the main feature, perhaps. But one thing I did want to just mention also is that Varsity Blood, the new slasher movie by our friend Jake Helgren, is now out, I believe, on DVD in the States, and is getting some good to mixed reviews. One thing is that I did do an audio commentary with Jake for the film, which didn't end up on the DVD for a number of reasons. I think there was a few sound issues with the Skype call on that, but I'm going to speak to Jake to see if we can maybe put that out as a bonus episode at some point down the line, if people would like to hear that. So if you would, let us know. Yeah, well, that all sounds good. Have we got anything else to say? Is it possibly time for Erik's joke of the week, do we think?
Yes.
Is it already?
Well, yes. I don't know. Or maybe...
Okay.
Or have you made it up yet?
I have, but it was a last-minute thing before you all start criticizing it.
Okay.
Because even though I've been off for 3 weeks, I'd completely forgotten about my joke of the week until about 5 to 2, which was 5 minutes before we started recording. Okay, so after that build-up, this will probably be the funniest one I've ever done. Why does Marilyn Burns get top billing in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
We don't know.
Because she's the Lone Star.
Oh, the Lone Star State.
Actually, Eric, I think that one was kind of clever.
Okay, thank you. I had another one lined up, but then I don't know if it made sense. So here was my original one. Why can only the strongest-willed people instigate a chainsaw massacre?
Again, we don't know.
Because it takes ass. Texas. But then it's also, it takes guts.
Yeah, the Lone Star was better.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Probably your best one so far.
Yeah, well done, Eric. See, if you put on the spot...
Yeah.
You should start doing those kind of off the cuff, more often. Maybe we'll actually laugh.
Well, don't go that far. No, thank you. Thank you, Erik. Okay. So what are we on to next? Are we on to a listener question? Have we got a listener question for this week?
Well, I think we've ran through them all, so I'm going to read this one. I think we might have answered it, but if we haven't, you can answer it. You can answer it, but if we have, just skip it. But let's see. Someone wants to know who would better survive in a slasher film, Susie or Toya. Have we done that one?
Oh, I don't know if we have. What do you think, Erik?
Well, obviously it's going to be Toya.
Well, she probably scared the killer to death.
Well, she does.
I think neither.
Why?
Well, Susie's the goth, and the goths never live.
No,
and Toya is kind of the bubbles, like the bimbo.
She's not a bimbo.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just saying I think that's the role that she would play in a slasher movie. So I think they would both die.
Wasn't Bubbles Michael Jackson's monkey?
Yes.
Well, see, I always think of Chained Heat. Do you guys know Chained Heat with Linda Blair?
Yes.
Well, there's a girl in it, and she's really dumb, and her name is Bubbles. So anytime there's a girl in a slasher movie that's very ditzy, I always call her Bubbles.
And that's what you think Toya would be like?
I think she would be like Bubbles, yes.
You're so wrong. You couldn't be more wrong.
Well, you do know that Toya and Susie have appeared in a film together, or in the same film anyway.
Jeepers Creepers?
No.
You're going to say something horrible now, aren't you? Go on.
No, you know, don't you know? Really, they have both appeared in the same film.
And were they both in Jubilee?
Yes, they were.
Oh, right. I didn't know Susie was in that.
Well, it's they're playing a track on TV.
Oh, yes. I think you have mentioned this before now.
Yeah, so they have appeared together. So it's a bit, there has been a truce in the past. So
not between you two.
Well, I don't know. I think we probably both decided that neither of them would survive to the end, although...
Okay.
I think
See, what I always wondered is, have Susie and Toya ever actually had a falling out? Do they even know each other?
They probably don't even know each other.
I doubt Toya's really come up on Susie's radar, if I'm honest.
Or vice versa. Toya was on Pointless Celebrities yesterday on BBC.
Yeah, well, that's a very apt term.
She was on the same team as Mark King from Level 42. And they were up against Carol Decker from T'Pau and Limal.
Wow, it's kind of talk about scaling the heights.
Yep.
There's just something.
Has Susie ever been on primetime BBC in the last 10 years? No, she hasn't.
Well, I don't think she needs to. I think that may be the difference. I don't think she needs
too busy
to go
working
on
at McDonald's.
Celebrity Catching the Attic or Pointless Celebrities. I think, but I think the irony is not lost on any of us there, Erik.
Would either of you watch like a Thelma and Louise remake starring those two?
Oh, I would. I tell you, that would be great, because what we'd have Susie driving, and then Toya in the side passenger, and they'd drive towards the end of the cliff, holding hands, and then Susie would jam Toya's seatbelt and then jump out at the last minute as the car went over the cliff.
Well, I was just going to say it'd be great.
Susie would be the villain.
Yeah.
Well, of course, yes.
I was just going to say it'd be great because they both went over the cliff.
I'll tell you what I'd love to see. I'd love to see a remake of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, starring Toya and Susie.
Who would play?
I'm sure you would. Yeah. Who would play who, Justin?
Well, Susie would probably be Joan Crawford.
Yeah.
And I think Toya would be like the kind of the crazy head loon, Betty Davis.
Well, Eric might actually enjoy watching that because I think Betty Davis beat Joan Crawford up very regularly in that movie.
Well, she did. Well, that's the thing is, but I think Joan Crawford's. I think. Well, but Joan Crawford got her own back on Betty Davis during that movie, don't you? When she put weights in her dressing gown.
Yeah, so she made it heavier. And didn't Betty Davis install was it Coke machines or something? Because Joan Crawford was, she was like a chairperson in Pepsi or something. I know they had a big feud going on.
Well, they had a massive feud, didn't they? And that is that great book, The Divine Feud, which I'm sure loads of it's made up. I liked it when she said, Betty Davis said that she got winded when she fell on top of Joan Crawford because her falsies were so hard.
I would have loved to have seen the two of them arguing.
Yeah. Well, one thing that makes me think it's probably like difference between Susie and Toya is I think there's a great bit in the book where it says that Joan Crawford, her chauffeur drives past Betty Davis and she's huffing and puffing up a hill and she offers her a lift and Betty Davis refuses and then Joan Crawford turns to the chauffeur and says, "Christ, she looks like my mother," which is something I can imagine Susie saying about Toya. So...
Susie's mother is probably about 176, seeing as Susie's about 143.
How's Toya?
53 or so.
She's older than that.
Well, she's not as old.
Susie's older than Toya.
Yeah, we've discussed this before.
By about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think
get over it, Justin.
I think what would happen is that at the end of the slasher movie, Toya would be stood there with a knife and it would pull back to reveal she's got a penis.
You're incredibly bitter and twisted since you came back from your holiday. What happened?
Thank you. Well, I just had time to sharpen my anti-Toya rhetoric. But anyway, I think we've reached a truce, haven't we? Susie
right.
Girl.
So...
Until the next episode.
So, anyway, well, thanks for that listener question, for opening up that scabby old wound. But that's enough about Toya. Let's go on to... Shall we go on to the main feature?
5 youths go to Texas and encounter a chainsaw massacre. And that is the plot description for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, really, I didn't go too detailed for this plot description because anybody listening to this movie has seen or at the very least heard of this movie. And, as everybody on this podcast knows, I think it is the greatest film of all time. I fail to see a single flaw in this entire movie. I think it's brilliant. I love, and I will say, and this might make me sound bad, but I will say the one thing in it, I did not feel that bad when Franklin got killed. I'm sorry to say. I did not really feel a lot of sympathy there. I can't imagine being stuck with him in a van for who knows how long. I mean, I would probably be on Leatherface's side, unfortunately. Well, I have to say, my favorite scene in the whole movie begins when Kurt enters the house and all the way until Pam is on the hook. I think that everything in that time span is very frightening. It's I don't know. I think that maybe audiences back in those times were not prepared for something like that. Maybe. And I know there's going to be some dissension here, but I love the last, half of the film where Sally's, I guess, being tormented by the family. And I think it's weird. This family is they're a family unit. And there's always been some debate as to, Leatherface and the hitchhiker and the cook, like what their relationship is. I've always just thought they were brothers and the cook was maybe the oldest brother. And they don't really treat him like he's their dad or something. So I don't know. I mean, I've always just kind of thought of them as brothers in the family. It's got one of the best chase scenes in slasher movie history, and I think poor Marilyn Burns did go through a lot. And I did want to say that, sadly she passed away recently. So obviously this episode is dedicated to her because I think that she lives up to her title as a scream queen, especially with as many times as she has to scream in this movie. I have a ton I can say about it, but I've said a lot over the course of this podcast about how much I love this movie. So I think I want to go with whose opinion I think will be the most negative, and that is Erik.
Yes, well, contrary to public belief, I don't hate Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I don't love it either, and it would certainly not be in my top 10 movies of all time. I do think it has a great opening sequence with the flashbulbs going off with that really sort of screechy noise that we heard there in probably not the trailer, but in the intro to the podcast. I think that's terrific, and all that graveyard stuff is really good. With the way the cannibals have posed the dead bodies on the monument, and then in the opening credits where you have these sort of eerie atonal music with images of solar flares, and it's quite disorienting, and it's very eerie. And it's a great way to start the movie. And I do agree with you that the scene where Kirk enters the house to where Pam is hung on the meat hook is excellent, is really well done. For me, there are several problems with the film. One is Franklin, as you were saying. He is too over the top in his obnoxiousness, especially when he's like blowing raspberries at his colleagues in the van. He just becomes, he's annoying to the point of being unwatchable. And secondly, that's the problem I have with the Cannibal Clan as well. To me, they're not frightening. They're just annoying. And anytime they're on screen, I'm just bored by them, to be honest. This is why I don't like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as much as everyone else. I'm with it for the first maybe 50 minutes or so where it concentrates more on the kids in the van. I could live without Franklin, to be honest, but the other four are fine, and the film works quite well for me. Once Leatherface chops up Franklin, the film sort of stops dead in its tracks at that point, and I'm just bored to tears by the final half hour, which just consists totally of noise, chainsaws revving, Sally screaming. Your half an hour of screaming and wailing is something that I know Justin likes because he's a Susie and the Banshees fan, but for me, I'd like something more from a movie. Speaking of Justin, I also there's a scene at the start where the kids go to the graveyard, and there's a guy sitting in a tire and he's drunk. And I was just thinking, a drunk guy in a graveyard acting like a buffoon, who would that remind you of?
Oh, Erik.
What? It's totally you, and don't deny it.
I wasn't that old in 1974.
It was the year I was born. The scene where Pam stumbles into the room with all the human bones and feathers is great as well. I love that. It's kind of like a bench or a settee or something that's made up of human bones. It's quite a startling image. But as I said, anything after the incident where Franklin is killed, I just become incredibly bored. And the film actually turns into what I consider an early prototype of Rob Zombie's Halloween movies, where it's just screaming and wailing and shouting and there's no let up. And even watching the extras on the Blu-ray yesterday, I was bored because nobody had anything to say about the film apart from, it was hot, it was low budget, it was really tiring, we had to shoot for X number of days, X number of hours per day, blah, 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 blah. I've never been a fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre or any of its sequels, and I think the problem is that, as I said, the finale of all of the series, it's tedious. And I'm not sure if we can, do we qualify it as a slasher movie? I suppose Leatherface is a classic sort of slasher image with, he's a guy in a mask with a chainsaw, but it doesn't behave like a proper slasher movie in my opinion. But I know I'm the sole voice here in not liking Texas Chainsaw Massacre as much as everyone else, because I have never seen or heard any horror movie fan say anything negative about the film. So I know I'm alone. Don't write in and complain. It's just me and my weird taste. I'll happily sit and watch Jaws 3, and you can all watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But as I said, not a big fan, but I really do enjoy the first 50 minutes. It's the last 30 that I think are horrendously awful. You
didn't even like the chase scene?
No. No.
I'm surprised you don't like the chase scene, because I think most people I've shown it to, like, they're with it through the chase, but then, like, I guess once she gets to the gas station, they just kind of are done.
Now, I'll say one other thing. When she jumps out the window and runs to the road at the very end, I mean, that's quite good. But, I mean, that's literally 2 minutes after sort of 30 minutes of utter tedium. But I'm sounding really negative here. I don't absolutely hate the movie. I like the first 50 minutes. I don't like the last 30 minutes. For me, it's a decent movie, I would call it, and that's about it. Sorry, Nathan.
No, it's okay. I mean, I love it, and I actually do love all the sequels. I mean, The Next Generation, Part 4, I think it's phenomenal. And I'm probably one of the only people in the world that thinks that. But
oh, no, I have a friend who loves that movie as well.
Oh, my God, it's so good. Okay, so Joseph.
Well, you and I always debate, our top 3 slasher films. This is your number 1, and Black Christmas is my number 1. And then we have people like Greg who, Halloween is his number 1. I would rate Halloween and certainly Black Christmas above Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the reason for that is something that Erik said, is the Franklin character is, quite frankly, he's just completely obnoxious and so unlikable, and he really just kind of drags a lot of the scenes with the teenagers in the van to just a screeching halt, and you're just waiting for him to die, and just someone just to put us out of our misery, just get rid of him, because he's dead weight in the film, because otherwise these other 4 people are really likable, they're interesting, but every time he's on screen I just want to just shut down. But having said that, I do think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a fantastic film, and unlike Erik, I don't mind the kind of screechy last half, because I think it was the first of its kind to really do that, and so it's kind of I guess you'd say a trailblazer, whereas everything that followed, all the Rob Zombie films and all these little annoying torture porn films, they kind of owe the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for, depicting that kind of raw reality with people like being terrorized. And I think, it really is realistic. I can see where that might get on someone's nerves, like it did Erik. But, it being the first of its kind, and, me seeing this, 20 odd years ago for the first time, it really was just kind of a revelation. I do like a lot of the scenes with the family at the end. I think, like I said, I think it kind of captures that whole, raw, abject terror, especially Marilyn Burns, who basically gets put through the ringer. She does such a phenomenal job of playing this, victim to these, this clan of weirdos. It just feels so, lifelike and realistic. It doesn't really feel staged or, like a production. It actually feels like, this is really happening, and somehow there was a camera left on in the house and around, this area where they're being terrorized. I do love the chase scene. Once Franklin is dead, I'm relieved. Basically, the whole Franklin issue and, a bit of a lull kind of in the midway point is what's keeping it from, being a higher class of slasher film for me. It is in my top 10 because I really think it really is that good, but it doesn't have the likability of, say, Barb or people like that from Black Christmas, or Jamie Lee Curtis's character in Halloween. It really is lacking kind of I don't want to say likability, because I do like most of the characters, but they're not as fleshed out as characters in the other films. The one thing I can say about Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I can't really say about, Black Christmas or Halloween is that it does benefit from that, having that kind of that realistic approach. Whereas, Black Christmas and Halloween obviously feel like, they're more production. They're more of like a production. Whereas, Texas Chainsaw Massacre feels more like a documentary. But overall, I think it really is a phenomenal film. It might be a little diluted, having seen it so many times. It doesn't really hold its, power as it once did, but still, it really is a classic. And, so a definite thumbs way up for me, with just a few marginal reservations, and actually for one reservation, that would be the Franklin character. But other than that, I'm gold with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, very good. I think you actually summed up why out of the three that you mentioned, it's my favorite of the three. And I think it's because of the real, that real feeling.
Right, and because it was the first of its kind to really do that, it deserves some kind of kudos for that.
Yeah, agreed. And Justin?
Joseph said that Halloween and Black Christmas are kind of classics, are kind of masterpieces. And I personally would add Texas Chainsaw Massacre to that list. I do. It's one of those films that I like and I admire, but I probably admire it more than I like it, if that makes sense. I still think it's a very powerful film. It's a very gritty film, and I don't personally have a problem with the end half an hour. I agree with Erik. I kind of agree with where it's coming from with that, and certainly I find that irritating with films like the Rob Zombie films and those films that just go with that without any real substance. But I feel the film has paid its dues to get up to that point. And for a film in 1974 to be doing what it was doing, and as various of you said, it's first of its kind. It was that kind of assault, because it is essentially an assault on the senses, the endless screaming, cacophony, the implied heat and everything, how uncomfortable it is, the sheer terror. It was very much an assault on the senses, which would not really have ever been seen before, I don't think, in a kind of film that has been widely distributed up to that point. So also, I don't actually mind the Franklin character. I can understand why he's annoying, but for me, he is a bit like he was almost like a buzzing fly that just won't go away. And all the other characters, including Marilyn Burns' character Sally, was irritated with him in the film. He wasn't in many slash movies when you have unlikable characters, and we talked about this many times before. The other characters don't seem to mind them. It's just accepted. Whereas Franklin, all of the characters in it pretty much see him as a bit of a loose wheel, not a loose wheel, a third, basically he was obviously somebody who didn't really want to bring along, but they kind of had to. And even his sister by the end is getting annoyed with him. But for me, his character ramped up that kind of like needling, that kind of twisting, fraying the nerves to build up to that kind of climax. What I really like about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think it's very scary. It has those, like Erik said, that great opening scene, and the first time you see Leatherface is rightly iconic with the slamming door. But it's also the humour as well, the kind of gallows humour. And especially, I really love the performance by, is it Jim Sido as the cook? And the way he kind of oscillates between sanity and insanity. So on one hand, at the beginning, he kind of warns the kids to stay away, doesn't he? So he's almost like a schizophrenic kind of character. On one hand, he's got one foot in normality and morality, but his other foot is very much planted into the family kind of madness, inherited madness. And I thought that was a very, very broad, but it's kind of a very nuanced as well, kind of performance by him, and I thought was really good. I think Leatherface is, and again I agree with Joseph that this is a film that to me it still works in some ways better than Halloween. Not that I prefer Halloween and I prefer Black Christmas to Texas Chainsaw if I'm going to rate them, but with Halloween I've seen it so many times before now that it loses its power, whereas Texas Chainsaw is so literally like a chainsaw. It's on the whole time and it's buzzing and going, and it doesn't let go. It's very difficult to watch this without being dragged into that, and that have feelings of being uncomfortable and on edge and the kind of madness of it all. But for me personally, I can't really understand how this all came together, because as much as I like Tobe Hooper's kind of like The Funhouse and Life Force and Death Trap, he's never made anything even approaching as good as Texas Chainsaw Massacre in ever since. So quite how this all came together, it seems like a perfect storm of a movie. And for me, none of the sequels come anywhere near this at all. Although I admire what he tried to do with Part 2, but I think it's is a classic, and I kind of it's a film I think is it very much earns its masterpiece status.
I very much agree. I agree with you about the cook as well, because I think he's actually very scary the way, like you said, he alternates between moments of being, sane and then being insane, because even around the dinner table when they're tormenting her, he's laughing with them while they're tormenting her. And then out of nowhere, he just stands up and says, "There's no need to torture the poor girl." I'm like, he's like, it's like like you said, a schizo. It just switches on and off between, and like when they're in the truck, he's like, at 1 minute acts like he's trying to comfort her, and then he starts hitting her with the broom again. I mean,
see, that's one of the things that I thought the first remake with Arlie Ermy, I thought they got wrong, because this cook character, who's the central kind of the patriarchal figure of the family, I like that he's kind of schizo, where 1 minute he's helpful, and the next he's just totally in line with his clan. He's so bizarre and just deadly. I think what they did wrong in the remake is they cast Arlie Ermy, who's basically known for being a former drill sergeant, so he's got that persona all the time. So right off the bat that he's going to be scary. There's no gray area with the Arlie Ermy character in the remake, because he's always just kind of, "What is your major malfunction?" And then, stuff like that. I like that in the original, that you don't really know if this guy is a good guy or a bad guy until, the fit starts hitting the shan, as it were.
Definitely. What was up with Pam in the freezer when Jerry finds her? Was she still alive?
I think she was.
Yeah, she was alive. I think she
just looked like, so vacant when she just kind of like spilled out. It almost looked like, I don't know. It's a very weird scene.
No, I take issue with this. I mean, I do agree with Nathan that scene where Kirk and Pam are basically killed, I think is a very, powerful moment in the film. And certainly the point where Pam almost gets out of the house and then Leatherface grabs her right at the last second. I think it's a very, very just raw moment. But I take issue with a bit because when Pam's in the house and she discovers all the bones and all the debris of all the dead things, she just sits there and it lingers on it for a little too long. Whereas any normal person, because the film feels so real, you'd think that this real person would see this and be like, "Okay, let's get out of here." But no, she just sits there. So she's had plenty of time to get out, but they just linger on, her looking at all this stuff for far too long to kind of generate any sympathy for her. Even though that moment is powerful, I thought, well, look, you had plenty of chances to get the fuck out of there, and you didn't do it. So,
well, I kind of have to disagree with you slightly there, and it's just because I've kind of been in a situation where it happened a long time ago where I thought someone was breaking in to my house, and I don't know what it was. Like my mind was telling me to run, but like it's almost like being frozen. Like you just cannot believe what you're seeing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I kind of can understand it. I mean, some people have said that their feet felt like, cement blocks, like they just felt like they couldn't move, like that terrified. So, I mean, I guess in a way I could understand it. Like, if you were just put in a position, I mean, she just thinks her boyfriend's playing a prank and suddenly she's in the midst of like furniture made of human bones. And, I just think the shock and fear level would just be through the roof, and it might take you like several minutes to get your bearings together to go.
Maybe,
I mean, it could be different from different people.
Yeah, maybe it's different with different people, but I think I would like to think that I would just be full of adrenaline at that point and scared out of my mind and just jumping out the nearest window. I don't care if I got hurt.
To me, like I agree with you. It's almost like the difference between Pam and Sally. Whereas Pam was frozen, as soon as Sally saw danger, she screamed for like a few seconds and then she was gone.
Right.
She started running. So, I don't know. I think, I guess it's just the difference between how people react to situations like that.
Her hot pants look really tight, though. Like difficult to run in.
I love the idea of. I mean, not that Pam wearing a like a full on shirt would obviously take away from the pain, but there's something about seeing her bare back getting lifted above the hook that to me just makes it even worse.
couple of shots. There's one where Pam goes into the house where the camera basically goes underneath the swing and follows her, and it's looking up at her. I think that is one of the most beautiful shots in any film I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
And how
Because she has a nice bum.
No. Just the way that the tracking.
It is. Admit it, Joseph. It is.
Fine. Eric. No, I just think the way they frame this, this camera's, this tracking shot just goes underneath the swing. It's looking up at her, and it just follows her all the way into the house. It's just so well done. Like how they set up the dolly on that. It's just really well done. And another moment I wanted to talk about was at the very end where Sally escapes and Leatherface is chasing her. I love basically how close he is to just hitting her with that chainsaw, and she just barely gets away. And like even when she jumps into that truck at the end, he just like barely misses her with a chainsaw, and it's just so terrifying.
Did anyone else notice the first time I've noticed the irony of the end when the brothers run over by the truck? Is the truck is an animal transporter? So,
and the actor playing the actor playing the driver of the truck is called Ed Gwynn, Guinn, which is perilously close to Ed Gein, which is, of course, the serial killer it was loosely based on.
Because what are your thoughts on it being an allegory for a sort of a pro-vegetarian movie?
Well, it's kind of not very.
I actually
subtle,
kind of. I was going to say, I obviously agree with that, because I think in the beginning they're talking about the cows that are getting slaughtered, and then they kind of end up becoming the ones getting slaughtered.
Yeah, and the head
Just
cheese
like
thing turns my stomach. The discussion of head cheese.
Oh, so gross.
So yeah, I mean, it is fairly. I don't know. Is Tobe Hooper or Kim Henkel are they really, really militant vegetarians or?
Well, Tobe Hooper said that he stopped eating meat while making the movie. And that was what he said in 2010, so presumably he still is. So
I was wondering, like, as a vegan watching it, Justin, did you find some of the stuff stomach churning at points, that, like just the dialogue?
Well, yes. I mean, it's effective, but I mean, Peter, the animal rights group, said it's one of the top 10 films to turn someone vegetarian. So
no, I can understand. Yeah,
so
and it doesn't have to show any graphic. Slaughter of animals.
It doesn't actually show any animals being killed, does it?
No.
Which is interesting, because I think what I read, was just sort of starting to get into background, but obviously just kind of seek into that, was that Tobe Hooper shot it for a PG rating, didn't he?
Yes.
Originally, and it was the whole ambience, the whole onslaught of the film. It was impossible to cut it down to a lower rating. So, but there was no in other films, like a film like Slaughterhouse, the 1987 slasher movie, or other movies. Well, most infamously, obviously the cannibal movies show real animals being killed, and of course the whole. Not point of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but the idea is that the humans are being treated in the way that animals are being treated, farmed animals. That although you see cattle on a ranch, don't you, and they drive past a slaughterhouse and say, it's what is that terrible smell? They don't actually show any animal slaughter in it, which I think is good, but it doesn't mean the film is any less powerful. But I thought that is interesting, because I'd always heard about the kind of the vegetarian kind of theme running through, and it was only until today when I actually looked that up that I actually found out that Tobe Hooper had given up eating meat when he was making the film, so it disgusted him so much. And I think actually there was, from reading about the smell and stuff on set, that probably put people off meat for life, I would think. So, but it was interesting.
I thought it was interesting that, in this film, pretty much the victims come to the killer rather than, because, if you think about it, if they just went and looked at the house and got back in their van and drove away, like, none of it would have happened. Well, it all happened because they came to them.
Well, if they'd taken the advice of the cook, they would have done that, wouldn't they? He advises them at the start of the movie when they pull up at the petrol station to leave and go to carry on their journey, and it's only because that's the thing I didn't understand when they went back to their grandfather's house, which was dilapidated, wasn't it? It was kind of it was, it wasn't being lived in at that moment. That presumably their grandfather must have lived next door to the Sawyers.
Yes, he must have. Yeah.
So presume, but it's so whether or not. It was my understanding, and I'm not. Maybe this is wrong. Was that they were slaughterhouse workers that had essentially become cannibals, and they become so kind of lost all kind of human empathy for other humans from their kind of career of killing animals and hundreds of thousands of animals. They turn to eating people. Is that kind of your?
That's what I'm thinking. Do you think that the group were the first people that they had actually killed? Because at the start of the movie, it was about them grave robbing. So I'm wondering if this was the first people that they had actually murdered instead of just grave robbing.
Not according to Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. The prequel from 2005.
Not that thing. I will say, out of the Texas Chainsaw movies, I'm not a fan of the remake, the prequel, or that god-awful 3D thing that they've tried to call a sequel. I love the fact that after, at the end, when Sally gets back to town, basically all these townspeople come out, and suddenly this farmhouse is full of the Sawyer family with a baby and everything. With a baby who apparently should be in her late 30s, who's actually 21.
Yeah. Well, I kind of guess the whole grave robbing thing was the Ed Gein angle, wasn't it? That they were because they saying about because Ed Gein, I think he murdered one person, didn't he?
I think he murdered two.
Yeah, he didn't murder.
He killed two people. Yeah,
that's a misnomer that people think that he's this big heinous serial killer, and he didn't really kill that many people.
He was actually a very mild-mannered.
He was actually really
country
lovely.
guy.
Yeah,
he's just
an incredible lover.
He's misunderstood.
Erik.
What I like, there's I know Nathan has seen it, but have you guys seen Summer School?
Yeah.
No.
There's the characters of Chainsaw and Dave. They're obsessed with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're kind of like the horror version of Siskel and Ebert. And there's one scene where he's like, "Anna Maria, have you seen the movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre?" She's like, "No, it is good." He's like, "Oh, I got to tell you, I love this film. It had passion and a plucky spirit, and the characters had integrity. Like when Leatherface went on that strict diet of human flesh, he had to cut out chicken and fish completely." And then he's like, "Dave, I agree with you, but I'm going to have to take it a step further. Sure, Leatherface, he wore masks made out of human flesh, and he hung people on meat hooks. We've all got quirks. I've got them, you've got them, Dave, and that's what makes these characters so compelling. Thumbs up."
Hanging people on a meat hook is a quirk.
Yeah.
It's just quirky. I'm surprised Pam wasn't like, "Oh, that quirky Leatherface."
Yeah. Ooh, kinky. Yeah.
I guess maybe before we get into background, what did you guys think of the remake?
I didn't mind it. I thought it was quite good. No?
I can't believe
I did not like it.
I didn't mind the 3D one either.
The 3D one, I
like The Grudge.
I love The Grudge. The 3D one, there's several things that bugged me. What bugged me, number one, is I hate the idea that suddenly there's a whole family in that house. I mean, they took the time to recreate that whole thing with the big truck and everything looks really well. The set design, looks very good. But then they take the story and it just is so ridiculous. The timeline makes no sense. And, and I could forgive that. I would say the middle where the friends get there and Leatherface starts killing them all off is great. But once she gets to the police station, it just killed me. The way Erik feels about Texas Chainsaw, he actually likes the first 50 minutes. That's how I feel about 3D. And then the last of it, I absolutely hate it.
See, I would agree with Nathan on the 3D one. I think the timeline and the whole, paint Leatherface as the hero kind of mires the film. But the middle portion where it's just an out-and-out slasher film, I think it's just great. When I was watching, I was like, well, this is great. Why is everyone complaining? Because this is just fun. But then it takes that nosedive at the end. And I think with the first remake, what kills that movie is the whole go back and save the baby subplot. Just really got under my skin.
I kind of barely remember any of them, actually. Wasn't the original remake was, 2003, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that for a decade, so I can't remember. The 3D remake I thought was very silly, but it was quite... I'm not although I'm a great admirer of this first film, and I very much like the second film, none of the other films I've got much interest in rewatching any of them, if I'm honest. But I thought the 3D one was. That's why I found it quite silly fun, because I didn't, when I watch like Rob Zombie's Halloween, and I can get upset how much it trashes what is a very beautiful kind of artful, scary film. With this, although if you watch the 3D film and this original, they're complete chalk and cheese. They're completely nothing alike.
Chalk and head cheese.
Chalk and head cheese. Yes. I bits like when Leatherface runs into the fairgrounds, and he looks like a midget with a chainsaw. Just made me, howl with laughter. I thought it was hilarious, but that's possibly not the kind of reaction they were looking for.
That's true. You might have just liked it for the wrong reasons.
I think I liked it for the wrong reasons. I really don't
think they were trying to make it funny.
No, but it was hilarious, and it was kind of one of those films you're watching, just thinking, "Wow, this is so bad." It's starting to get quite funny, and I think it's interesting with. I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the. It's the way all the sequels and things have gone. It's kind of weird. I know with Halloween and Friday the 13th sequels, they've all gone in kind of strange things. You've had the remakes with both franchises and Nightmare on Elm Street as well. But with this, it seems like they come back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre every 3 or 4 years, don't they? And just recreate something or do something. And it's always a case of diminishing returns, when in fact, really all you need, just like in a Friday the 13th film or a Halloween film, is the killer stalking teenagers, without having to put in any massive backstory or things like that. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if next time they just they have a brand new remake. I don't know if they're planning anything new.
I had, I guess one thing I thought they kind of wasted, and my question for you guys is, would you have liked 3D even more if the last half they took out all that police station and do your thing cuz and all that nonsense, and it was just him stalking her at the fairgrounds and killing off fairgoers? I have this image in my mind of Leatherface running to the Ferris wheel and just hacking people as they come back down on the Ferris wheel.
That would
I
have been
thought
great.
They missed a huge opportunity by not having like a huge massacre at the fairgrounds. I thought I probably would have loved it if they would have done that.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think they were trying to do something different in that, but sometimes that doesn't work, and it didn't work with that whole idea that you would get a normal, well-adjusted young woman suddenly becoming, going psychotic in a completely different way to Marilyn Burns does in the original. Because obviously, at the end of the original, and with every time you see, when you see her in the sequels, she's usually just as like a cameo, isn't she, as a mental patient? So you kind of always think that it's driven her insane, doesn't it? That night.
Does she cameo in the sequels?
She does in part 4.
All right.
Oh. But isn't she just in a mental hospital at the end?
Yeah, at the end she's in a hospital.
As far as the actual sequels go, I actually like part 3. Because it's kind of more of the quieter Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, whereas they capture the lead girl. There's not a lot of screaming. It's a lot of just kind of a lot of off kilter dialogue, and I kind of like that. I don't really much care for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 because whereas in the first film and you have all that screaming at the end, it feels real. In the second one, it feels like they threw it in just because it was expected, so it feels kind of scripted and phony, and it just gets really annoying. I'd say more so than the original.
I think from what I've read with Tobe Hooper was kind of basically he gave audiences what he thought they wanted or what they expected of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, because again it's a film that has the reputation of being a gore fest, and it's not gory at all, is it? Or it talks about gore, and it talks about violence, and it talks about blood, but it shows very little explicitly. And I remember, I don't know if you, because the history of the films was banned in the UK for a long time, and it got a cinema re-release around the time The Exorcist did, in probably the the late 90s maybe.
1999 or so, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember going to see it at the cinema, and people were like howling with laughter all the way through it, which not as much as they laughed at The Exorcist, which is curious because it was. I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a film with a lot of humour in it, especially with the scenes like with Leatherface. We talked about the cook, but when Leatherface is chasing after Sally with the chainsaw, and he stops and he bunny hops to a couple of steps to one side because he can't stop himself going right, and then goes on. It's very much like what you'd see with a Roadrunner, cartoon, and so. But I think that was intentional. The humour, but it was there was a vogue, I think, when those films released, that people went to see them thinking they would be the most horrific and terrifying movies they would ever see, but actually realising that they still hold up, they're still classics, but the fact that these are people in bell bottoms and tight red pants, like Pam were wearing, it takes people out of it, just in the same way as Halloween, whereas an audience at that time when they're watching it would see their contemporaries in it and would react to it in a much more kind of honest way. Well, not honest, but you know what I mean, would react to it in a way that would be more real for them. The situations and the characters would be more real for them. For now, when a modern audience watching it, I think that does create a distance.
Yeah, I went to the cinema to see its reissue in the late 90s as well, and I don't recall any laughter. There was a few gasps of horror, in fact. But I mean, with The Exorcist, there certainly was. The audience were laughing at certain bits. I think just at the rude words coming out of Linda Blair's mouth, mainly.
Did that annoy you as a theater goer?
Yeah.
If they were laughing at that?
Well, because I'm such a fan of The Exorcist, it did annoy me a bit. Because they were laughing... at bits that were supposed to be scary, they were laughing at, and it was kind of ruining the atmosphere.
I think partly because there'd been so many parodies, hadn't there?
Yeah, that's the thing.
That it was, where Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there haven't really been parodies as such, have they? As, in the same way, anyway, that they have with The Exorcist.
I'm just watching. I have the film on here in the background while I'm doing the podcast, and the scene has just come up where Franklin gets out of the van with the sausage in his mouth. And it turns my stomach because it looks like
it's so
plop.
Gross.
It looks like a doggy plop.
Yes. Well.
I want to know what it is he's eating, because I mean that's obviously supposed to be humans.
Well, it was the cook in the cooks, because there's that scene, isn't there, with Sally when she thinks she's safe, and she's looking. You can't really tell if she's kind of joined the dots yet, but she looks and there's all that kind of the meat hanging down, curing, isn't there, or cooking, and it's all the red light around it. And presumably at the dinner table, she's eating, or they're eating her friends, aren't they?
And Leatherface's face that he wears in the latter stages of the movie, that's obviously a woman's. Is it a woman's face, or has he just put makeup on? I'm just wondering, is that meant to be Pam's face that he's peeled off and?
I thought it was Pam's face.
Yeah,
I didn't know if he would have had time to have done that yet. I mean, he might have.
But Ed Gein.
I mean, I guess it depends on the gap between when Jerry's killed and when they go to look for him.
But Ed Gein was a transvestite, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. He was a transvestite. He dressed up in women's skins and various things. So, which is why there was that the Hitchcock's Psycho was kind of the other film that was kind of tipped its hat to this. But
I know people who wear women's clothes and they're weird. Is that right, Justin?
Well, I wouldn't know. They've the transvestitism is not a not precursor to psychosis.
Yeah, so watch out, everyone.
But
of a certain Mr. Justin.
But I would say though, if the transvestite wants to dress up in skin, that would be a precursor.
Yes. What were you saying, Justin?
Yes.
Sorry.
So,
what were you saying, Justin?
I was saying on 1 or 2 New Year's Eve fancy dress parties does not make me a transvestite.
Oh, okay. Whatever.
Just in the same way as a few candid shots of you on a sofa, Erik, doesn't make you a porn star.
Ooh, touche. Ooh, I have tasted my own medicine and it is bitter.
Exactly. Yeah, don't mess with me.
Yeah.
Don't fuck with me. It's not my first time at the rodeo, Erik.
Woohoo! Oh, what?
You're quoting Mommy Dearest.
I am. Yes, it's a Joan Crawford extravaganza, this episode. Who would have thought it on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Don't fuck with these fellas.
I can't believe Nathan just used the F word.
Well, but I was doing it
fellas?
quoting a film.
Yeah.
Yes, fair enough. So, do we want to move on to some background? Nathan, I think you might have a big one this time.
Well, I didn't really study too much background because, in all honesty, this is one of those movies. It's like Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. I mean, who hasn't heard all the stories by now? I can tell you that it was very hot.
Really?
Erik knows that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know that the scene where they cut Sally's finger to feed Grandpa, they cut her finger for real because they couldn't get the tube to work. So they didn't even tell her either. I mean, she had no clue they were going to slit her finger open for real.
Health and safety.
I would have been very angry. And apparently they were all going pretty crazy from being trapped in that house. And I'm sure Gunnar Hansen was not too thrilled being in that costume that he could not take off. I'm sure it stunk really, really bad.
Yeah.
And I would say that as far as like screaming, loud terror and that kind of thing, the only thing that comes close would be Eaten Alive, because at the end there's a lot of screaming and, you know, craziness going on, which I really like Eaten Alive as well. I think it's a good movie too. I don't really think I have like a whole lot more background. I mean, they turned the farmhouse into a restaurant, which was pretty. I want to go there. I'd like to go there. I think that'd be fun.
They moved it as well, didn't they? From its
I didn't know
location.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And I know for a long time, Terry McMinn was kind of like the lost member that of the Texas Chainsaw family. But she's actually, you know, got a Facebook page now, and, you know, she's doing the convention circuit. So I'd really like to meet her. I was able to meet Marilyn Burns, Gunnar Hansen, and John Dugan, who plays Grandpa. And all three of them were awesome. It was really fun to talk to them and, you know, get their autographs and things like that. But, yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't do a whole lot of background information just because I think we've heard it all before.
Okay, right. Well, thank you, Nathan. Joseph, how about you?
Well, I think the only things I really have is basically stuff that people already know, like the bit where he's hitting her in the head with a hammer. They actually cracked her a couple of times with the hammer, and she wasn't too pleased about that. And coming off of that, she was kind of famous for, you know, after the movie was, you know, all said and done, she didn't really like to talk about it because she went through some, you know, some harrowing experiences on the set. But the guys from the Terror Trap actually, you know, tracked her down for an interview. Marilyn Burns, by the way. And, you know, she was kind of apprehensive to talk about the film, but then when she talked about it with those guys, she's like, oh, I guess that wasn't as bad as I expected. Maybe I should do more of these interviews more often. And that's when she really started hitting the convention circuit, because she found she really had no idea that she had this fan base. And so she did a lot of conventions, you know, up until her death just about a month ago. But that's pretty much all I have.
I wish more like people that had been in some of these older horror movies would realize, you know, hey, people are big fans of it. You know, hey, you should get on the convention circuit. You know, I mean, it could be very lucrative. Mm-hmm. You guys know Donna Wilkes from Angel and is it Jaws 2?
Yeah.
For a while, she didn't talk about her movies at all, but now she's finally started doing the convention circuit, which, you know, I'm like,
I like her hair.
They should. I like Donna Wilkes.
Okay, well, I have that one of the original titles for the film was Stalking Leatherface, and then by the time production started in the summer of 1973, it just changed to Leatherface. It was, as Justin was saying, refused a certificate in the UK and subsequently Ireland as well, and remained unreleased until the late 90s, although it had, I think you could show private club screenings of it up until that point. And the only other thing I have is I was watching the Shocking Truth documentary, and as you say, they have title cards at the end explaining what happened to cast and crew members who weren't in the documentary. And they said that what's her name? Terry McMinn. They said she didn't want anything to do with the documentary. She's distanced herself from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And this was made in 2002, so obviously things have changed since then. In fact, on the Blu-ray, there's a separate interview with her, and she seems quite forthcoming and happy to discuss the movie. You know, I'm sure the couple of dollars that maybe slipped away probably helped. Ted Nicolau I didn't realize worked in the sound crew of the movie. He went on to be, he made kind of B movies for Charles Band in the 80s and 90s, including things like Terror Vision and the Subspecies series. I didn't think he would have been old enough to have worked in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but obviously he was. Probably that's all I have, apart from, famously the makers of the film were fleeced of all the huge amount of profits the film made in the 70s because they distributed through a company called Bryanstown Pictures, who were mafia run apparently, and that's why nobody became a millionaire off of Texas Chainsaw Massacre who was involved in the making, sadly. Justin, over to you.
Well, again, to be honest, I haven't had much time to look into this because I've just got back from holiday, but one thing I did find, that a quote from Toby Hooper about the vegetarian angle, and it says, "I gave up meat while making that film. In a way, I thought the heart of the film was about meat. It's about the chain of life and killing sentient beings, and it has cannibalism in it, although you have to come to that conclusion by yourself because it's only implied." Guillermo del Toro also gave up meat after watching that movie, so which I thought was quite interesting. I think we've covered pretty much everything. There's lots of stuff on IMDb, the background, which again is never necessarily that reliable because sometimes some of the stuff I was reading seemed to contradict itself. But obviously Toby Hooper went on to make what's it called?
Death Trap,
which was kind of Eaten Alive, which was, I kind of guess, like you say, none of them made a massive amount of money out of this, and I think in the same way that Wes Craven kind of sold the rights, didn't he, to Nightmare on Elm Street and didn't really make much money out of that. Obviously Toby Hooper wanted, I think Death Trap Eaten Alive was his kind of, it was almost like a remake, wasn't it really, of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it was kind of his attempt really to recoup some of that money. And I think one of the things I did see from the Variety Archives was saying, I think Universal, he got a 5-picture deal with them because of the strength of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which did make an awful lot of money, and it was still in heavy rotation throughout the 70s, and probably I think it was re-released in the early 80s as well after the slasher movie boom. So it was a film that its reputation kept it in cinemas. And it's obviously still like kind of probably a byword. If you say to somebody who's not a fan of horror movies, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they will, would balk at the idea of watching it, because I think even the title itself is more violent, isn't it, than film actually is.
It's had this stigma over the years that it's the goriest film ever made, but if you watch it, there really is no gore in the movie.
The only blood you see really is when the hitchhiker cuts his hand, and when he cuts Franklin, and Leatherface dropping the chainsaw on his leg, isn't it, at the end? That's really the only blood, apart from Marilyn Burns has blood on her, doesn't she, throughout. And it said, I think, quite a lot of that was her own blood as well from getting scratched up in the bushes. Have you ever been scratched? Have you ever been scratched up in the bushes, Erik?
Plenty of times.
Yes, I bet you have.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I said Texas Chainsaw Massacre was unreleased here until the late 90s, but that can't be right because it's on the Video Nasties 2 disc that it had a VHS release at some stage. It was released, wasn't it? But it wasn't ever prosecuted. It may have been. It was withdrawn, wasn't it, before it was prosecuted or something along those lines. It's just the BBFC website says that it was submitted in 1975 for a certificate and it was refused. But that's the only entry they have.
That's curious, isn't it? I know it did get. It got a London only release, I think. And then they tried to, and it's part of a film festival, because back then I think councils could release controversial films themselves, in a kind of like a borough by borough kind of status or city by city status. And I think it got released. And then they tried to cut it to get an X certificate, and they found as we talked about, there's not really anything. You can't cut anything from this film, can you? Because there's no. Even if you cut all the blood from the film, you'd only be cutting out a few seconds, wouldn't you? And it wouldn't do anything to diminish the kind of the overall feel of the film, which the oppressive and violent feel of the film. So they weren't able to cut it enough for it to ever be released until obviously more recent times. But apparently it got, I think it won something at Cannes, or it was certainly shown at Cannes. So I think it was recognised fairly early on that it was a film of quality, rather than not just kind of a trashy horror movie, but it was a film that went beyond the constraints of the kind of the B movie into something, you know, more special. So
how did you guys handle the video nasties? Like, how did you guys watch some of these movies, or did you just not?
Well, by the time I started renting horror movies and that, it was probably 1987, 88 when it was all more or less blown over. Now, some of them were still available where I was living, but the majority of them weren't. And if they were in reissued cut versions. So, like, I had to go to bootleggers really in the UK to get uncut versions of horror films. And that only really started in the 90s when I sort of was out of school and working and could afford it, because they weren't cheap. So basically I didn't see them, to be honest. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I saw on a bootleg VHS probably in the early 90s because it wasn't available.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was pretty much the same for me, really. I mean, I saw the time we got a video player. I think the video nasties stuff was going on at the time, but a lot of the films that we saw when I saw were things like Friday the 13th, Halloween 2, films like Rosemary's Killer, The Prowler were very heavily cut anyway. So to actually see video nasties, there were a few kind of floating around we got hands on, but it was mostly through bootlegs and nth generation VHS stubs that got introduced to the films. The irony often was that those were the uncut Dutch versions or whatever, and the ones that were withdrawn or banned in the UK were already being pre-cut, and some of them were ones that had been cut for cinema. So a few films came out uncut on video, but the majority of them, films like some of the cannibal films and certainly films like Rosemary's Killer, and but the X-rated, cinema releases, which are already heavily cut. So in fact, it actually meant that people were seeing more violent films by banning them, which I think was one of the big ironies of it that whole time.
I would have been really mad if I were you guys. I think I'd have been very upset about
as
this.
long as they weren't banning Toya and Kajagoogoo, I was fine.
Of course.
Because music was my main passion back then. So.
Yes, what a missed opportunity. Corrupting the nation's youth.
What would that have been, the music nasties?
Yeah.
Well,
you're setting them up to say something horrible about Toya. Go on, say it, Justin, say it.
No, I wouldn't lower myself to saying anything about her
Actually,
videos.
I wasn't even trying to set him up for that, but I guess I inadvertently did.
Well, is that us satiated for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, do you think?
I have one other thing.
Okay.
And it's a little segment since, we don't really have much feedback. It's called What Would You Do in This Situation? Now think about it. You're there. We'll just say that Justin is Sally, Erik is Franklin.
Hey!
Joseph can be the van. So you're there and all your friends are gone and they took the keys and it's pitch black. What do you do?
Well, I'm kind of wondering why. Are you trying to imply that they all want to ride me?
That was not what I was implying. I was just trying to think of what all was in that area at the time.
Why do Franklin?
Yeah, what you're saying, we should just sort of slip into Joseph for the evening.
Is that what you guys would do? What you guys would do?
I'd be okay. I mean, he doesn't kill the car, so I'm okay.
I think it's a van.
Or van, whatever. Automobile.
I would probably get... Well, the thing is, they don't know what's happened. They probably just think their friends are off screwing, don't they? Because it's a horror movie. So, although they do the logical thing, don't they? Go looking for them.
I don't think I would have. I wouldn't have went walking in unfamiliar...
It's not. It defies logic to be pushing somebody in a wheelchair through scrubland.
Yes,
really.
Yes, it does. But why were you typecasting Erik as an annoying character? I don't know.
I wasn't trying to. I was just putting you all with different characters.
Well, I think if thinking logically, what I would do is I would make like Linda Blair in Hell Night and then hotwire the van and drive away and leave Erik there.
Do you know how to hotwire?
Yeah.
Do you even know how to drive a car?
No. But if I
See,
was...
I know how to drive, but if I was Franklin, I'd have no leg muscle. So.
No. But say, yeah, that's if I was like Linda Blair as Marty in Hell Night, that's what I would do. But otherwise, I'd probably just get in the van and turn all the lights off and hide until morning.
I wonder if they would have done that if Leatherface would have found them. Because I kind of get the idea that the only reason he came out after them is they were yelling and getting closer to the house.
I think you're probably right. But it would have made for a very boring movie, wouldn't it? So,
but I'm just wondering, like, in real life, how would somebody handle a situation like that? Because if you don't have the keys, you can't drive away unless you do know how to hotwire.
Well, luckily, I know how to hotwire a car, so I'd be okay.
Yeah, but you're a van. You can't do anything.
No.
I can hotwire myself.
But you know how, if you're out in the countryside and it's pitch black, how disorientating that can be. You know, it's not. But again, like I take Eric's point that, Sally huffing and puffing, pushing, a fat man around in a wheelchair, isn't a good idea.
Although he did act as a human shield when Leatherface did show up.
That's true. He did help her in that way.
If I were Sally, when I know Leatherface kills Franklin, but if I were Sally, I would have just dumped him on Leatherface and crushed him.
What, tipped him out? That would have been.
Okay, here's a question for you then. Who would you rather
if I didn't roll him into oncoming traffic earlier in the film.
Well, who would you rather be stuck in a van with on a hot Texan day, Franklin or Inga?
Oh,
Inga, I guess.
Inga.
Oh, Joe. I would say Inga too.
Yeah. I was saying Inga.
Okay, Joe. What about Franklin or Loops from Detour?
Oh God. Franklin.
What about Franklin?
I knew you'd say that.
Franklin or Toya?
Toya, of course.
Toya.
She could sing.
Yeah.
God,
she could calm us all down with her lovely voice.
She has to break free from Leatherface.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think
Justin's just itching. He's scraping. He's like, how can I turn this into an insult?
Yeah. Well,
it was a serious question. But Nathan did touch on the fact that we have very little feedback. In fact, we have no feedback this time. So
fuck you people.
Yeah, last 3 weeks, not a single person has written in. We're all very sad, aren't we, Erik?
Yeah, it is very sad.
This is.
Oh, I'm not Erik. Whoops. Chip of the morning to you. It's sod.
This is Erik earlier. And that's when I told him we had no feedback. So
yeah, it was very upsetting.
Yes. So we do need you to write in to let us know, because we don't even know if anyone's listening. And if no one's listening, there's not much point doing this, is there? Well, actually, there probably is, because we'd probably still do it even if it was nobody listening. But
yeah, just for fun.
Just for fun. But if you'd like to write in and let us know, please do, because we're going to tell you in a minute what's coming up.
Be sure to search for and like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at THC_podcast. Our voicemail is 858-233-9281. And you can email us directly at the.hysteria.continues@gmail.com.
Yes, so please do write in, because next time, I think this is a bit of a roller coaster for Nathan, isn't it? Because you're going from your favourite movie of all time to perhaps one of your least favourites. So, Joseph, it's your choice, isn't it? Do you want to tell us? Because we were meant to be covering this film this time, weren't we? But because of Marilyn Burns sadly passing away, we decided to swap things around. So, do you want to tell us what we are definitely covering?
Yes, we are covering Silent Rage, and our good friend Johnny Krug will be on the show with us.
Yes.
That's how I watched that film, actually. In a Silent Rage.
In a Silent Rage. Very good. But if you
I should have used that as a joke of the week, damn it.
Missed opportunity. But
I didn't laugh then, and I'm not going to laugh now. So.
Yeah, but your laughter means nothing to me.
Sure it does.
If you are going to write in, then do so within a week, because we're recording the next episode a week in advance. So we're recording it next weekend for release the weekend after. So if you want to hear us read out your feedback and any questions you've got, send them in the next week and we'll get round to it then. So what were you playing out with?
Well, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of notorious for not really having any music, so I took the Leatherface song from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 by Laz Rocket, which is a kind of a hair thrash metal, kind of a ode to Leatherface. So there you go.
Ooh,
okay,
sounds brilliant.
Well, we'll soon find out, won't we?
My ears are alive.
So hopefully join us next time. If anyone is out there listening, then we'll see you next time. So say goodbye to the good people.
Goodbye to the good people.
Yes.
Joseph didn't say goodbye.
You ruined the door, you damn fool. Okay. So we stuck our little tootsies in the water, and we ducked under the waves we did. Ha ha.